Hello, everyone, and welcome to a misnomer. I didn't actually mean to run the TED Excellence intro because this is technically not a TED Excellence, so apologies for that. I clicked the wrong clip. Should have been the regular old opening, but 6 of one thing, half a dozen of the other. Either way, hello, everyone. Welcome to Toxic Google, as it is. Might not be an ongoing series, but at least for this particular one, it is for me and my friend, Satsu2Cents. Hello, Satsu.
What up, Deb?
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Nothing to complain about, so I won't.
Well, let me change that for you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, what is it today? Thursday. Yes, terrifying Thursday. And we're coming to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dogcat Fox, a Pepperjack, and part 2 of our look at raising children in a racially unjust America. A special brought to you by Talks at Google, starring Dr. Jennifer Harvey, who I have seen around the territory of TEDx talks and similar things in the past, but I don't think I've ever done anything on her specifically. So for those of you just tuning in, obviously, this is part 2. Part 1 we did a week ago. You can find that on my channel. I don't know if you necessarily need to have watched it to prepare for this, but it might at least give you an idea of where things are headed. So what did we learn last time, Satsu? What do you remember?
Oh, boy. Let me see. I'm trying to remember everything here because I block out so much stuff after I see it, after it's traumatized me.
Real quick. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people, Scribbles, and Satsu. Hello, Kyle.
Refresh my memory, man, because
let's see, from what I recall, we learned that children as young as 3 to 5 years old start recognizing racial difference, which means that if parents don't intervene immediately, children will become automatic racists because recognizing difference is the same as conjuring a value judgment of people on the basis of difference.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I am to believe. Thank you, Johnny Stoffel. Did I misschedule Throbbing Thursday? This is awkward. Throbbing Thursday? That's my other channel. That's Non-Author Dark. You want some throbbing? Go over there. But thank you, Johnny. What else did we learn? I think we were admonished with the evils of colorblindness.
Uh-huh.
And I think various iterations of those notions were bandied about. And she talked about her, Dr. Harvey talked about her early career in having to admit to herself that she was white and coming from a religious background and some other things, which I'm sure are very relevant.
Extremely relevant, I'm sure.
Extremely relevant. But regardless, we're going to get right into this because this is a part 2. And so if you want the full preamble of everything, you can go back and watch part 1. So I've set the clock on the video so just a few seconds before we actually cut off the last time, because we cut off at the end of a question, I think, or something like that. And so I wanted to give us all the context we needed. Also, just like to try to dispel more confusion, again, this is not a TED Excellence, despite the fact that I ran the TED Excellence intro instead of the one that I meant to. And so there's no bingo card to follow on this one. But you're welcome to if you'd like. If you have a bingo card ready, I don't think I put the link in the description, but you're happy to do so. And if you do happen to get a bingo on this broadcast using the TEDx bingo card, be sure to tweet that final image out to me, and I will display it prominently on my Twitter feed, which, of course, you know, is a great honor.
Because he said
so. Yeah, because I said so. That's right. Okay. Well, all that being said, let's dive right into it. So we were just about to get a follow-up question or something from the moderator/host, Stephanie LeBlanc, to Dr. Jennifer Harvey. Let us proceed.
Okay, so I want to go in like 3 different directions. Okay. Based on what you just shared. But let's go with this divergence of relationships based on the education that happens at home, right? So for instance, for me, with my eldest, who's now 10, when she was 4, she came home from school and told me, Mom, you know what? I'm so glad I'm white. And I said, excuse me? I'm so glad I'm white, and I'm so thankful for Dr. King, because now I get to play with Black kids and like my Black cousins.
How old did you say the kid was?
4.
Right, 4. Okay, those of you following along with a bingo card can probably by all means circle a anecdote that probably didn't happen. But thank you, Pinkal, the Driving Ape Man. Woohoo! Yes, woohoo! Yeah, so I'm a 4-year-old. Boy, you know that those precocious 4-year-olds running in talking about Dr. Martin Luther King and how glad they are that they can play with their Black friends.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true.
And that was that moment. And the story reminded me of what you shared about that silence and then kids drawing their own conclusions. Yeah. I had these assumptions that she knew who she was, that we lived in our Blackness proudly and intentionally. But clearly the conversation and what she was seeing and hearing wasn't direct enough for her age group, right?
Do you live in your Blackness intentionally and with courage, Satsu?
I live in my Blackness without choice, and that's pretty much it. Because I was born in it.
Well, let me. Okay, let's. I honestly, if I asked you this the last time, I've honestly forgotten in the last week. But just as a curiosity, what if anything does it mean to you, Satsu? You're not speaking for the demographic. You. What does it mean to you to be Black? Does it have some significance to you just on its own?
No, not really. I know there are some implications that come about and some things that I have to deal with for being Black. But as far as what it means to me, not much, because I've never really based my self-worth or capability or really anything off of that fact. And I guess I'm fortunate enough to say I haven't lived the life of some people who had to deal with some of the things that Black people have to live with, which may be a contributing factor to me feeling this way. But either way, I don't put a lot of value in that fact alone, because there is not much to be put into it.
Does that? Okay, so I'll take the other side. So let's say, like you said, there's someone who has gone through a whole bunch of terrible stuff on the basis of being Black, and they were to criticize you for not taking your quote unquote Blackness more seriously. What would you say to that person? No, having some idea of their personal history.
There's not much I can say outside of, look, if you want me to respect your experience as a person and what you've been through, then you got to respect mine as a trade-off. So if you've been through what you've been through, I feel for you, and it's unfortunate that you have been through there. And if you need support with dealing with that, that's fine. But I have not had that experience. Therefore, that it just doesn't mean that much to me. So if you want respect, you want me to acknowledge your experience and what you've been through, then I will, as long as you do that same thing for me. So if I have to take into the account that you've been through these things and acknowledge that, then that's fine, as long as you acknowledge that I haven't. So it's not the same for me. And that's all I really ask. Like, outside of that, there ain't much else that can really be said.
Yeah, because I would imagine that, the reasonable thing would be to say, well, your experience versus someone else's experience, but your sense of self is not somehow either more or less legitimate as a result.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see where we go with this then.
And so from that moment on, it's like, okay, how do you expose your kids to diversity, to understanding who they are, who others are? But then not everyone else is on that journey, right? So we see these warm and fuzzy stories of relationships between white kids and children of color. But then at some point, these cross-racial relationships, as the kids get older, kind of separate based on the level of education of race and racism that each child has.
What? Why?
Well, okay. So so what she's saying is, and this is kind of interesting the way that she said it.
Mm-hmm.
She's saying that these warm fuzzy stories that you hear about kids getting along and stuff, whatever, it's all well and good. But presumably, if you educate yourself about race relations and all that type of stuff like that or whatever, these relationships tend to fall apart. But what she doesn't realize she's saying is the type of stuff that they put into people's head once they get to college or whatever, that's the catalyst for the separation.
Because, isn't that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That is the catalyst for the separation. Because without that type of indoctrination, or you trying to fill their heads, letting them know that you are oppressed, that person over there is not your friend, they hate you, that's where the separation and stuff comes from. But if you don't get that, then chances are the relationship is fine.
Well, and it's not even necessarily saying that somebody hates you, just trying to say, like, look, you need to understand that your friend over there, they possess certain qualities on the basis of their skin color that just separate them from you. Mm-hmm. They're either less fortunate or they're more privileged, depending. And they can be a good person, but they're never going to escape that rift that exists between you because of your skin color.
Right.
And then you wonder, like, why suddenly there's a wedge between people on that basis.
Mm-hmm. It's manufactured. Because even if, let's just say, even if you did, you as a child, you just kind of were oblivious to the racism that surrounds you every day, and you were hanging out with this person that was your friend, and you did start to realize that naturally and just see what's going on. Most likely what you would do is draw the connection that, hey, this type of behavior, it exists in this world, but this person who's been next to me and near me this whole time isn't displaying that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the behavior of this person who claims to care about me, who I've been spending all this time with. So that wouldn't draw a rift between you two, unless you notice parallels between their behavior and the shit that you notice that, the discrimination and all that shit that people have to deal with. But that would be different, obviously. Yeah. That would be a whole nother thing. Yeah. So I just don't, I get what she's trying to say, but what she's trying to say is basic. It's kind of misleading.
Yeah. She's looking at the end result as something that is a natural progression.
Right.
If you don't educate, when in fact it's the quote unquote education that is leading to that. I mean, this wisdom and knowledge you think you're imparting onto these kids is actually telling them that they're different, and not different just on the surface level, different in a fundamental way that will never be bridged.
Right.
And okay.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on how to address that schoolhouse chatter that can happen, and that you come home and kind of hear some things that the kids heard either at school or have heard on the news or regardless? How can you address that to get everyone on the same level so that when they get to 12 and 13, they're not then looking at each other at odds because they don't understand each other anymore?
Well, you want them to look at each other at odds. You want them to acknowledge that there is a difference. You want them to acknowledge that there is a inherent flaw, either whether you categorize that flaw as the privilege they haven't earned or the disadvantages that they're going to experience as a natural result of simply being what they are. You're pushing that. So if they come home talking about that stuff, it's probably because they're getting the education you're advocating for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a really big, challenging journey that our kids go through. And of course, those warm and fuzzy stories you're talking about, usually those stories are about younger kids, right? We don't see them that often about teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder why that is. I wonder why it is that innocent kids who are, at least at that point, relatively immune from the wider notions of the world, and when people leave them alone because they're kids and they don't understand anything except the basics of, they're my friend. And that's really all the assessment you need. This kid is my friend. Who cares what they look like? If only we could just get away from that, get away from that childhood notion of simplicity.
And the story I like to share is to think about So my eldest is, both of my children are white. My eldest is 11. I have a nephew who's Black. He's about 13.
Mhm.
They've been really, really good friends their entire lives. We live in the same city.
But is there a but coming?
There might be a butt coming.
We're kind of collectively raising them together, my sister and sister-in-law and I and my partner. And they can be great friends right now. And I like to remind folks, like, I know that if I only ever teach my child, if I only ever say to her, look, police are safe, go find one and if you ever get in trouble. But her cousin, who is necessarily being taught that police are complicated for him, right? He's necessarily being given the talk that more white Americans are now aware that Black families have with their children.
Did you ever have the talk?
Not explicitly. Like, I don't remember my mom ever sitting me down and it's like, hey, let me teach you how to deal with cops. But she talked to us about certain things when it became relevant. I was never taught that because I'm Black, I'm some kind of target or something, like police hate me or whatever. I was taught to respect the police. I was taught if they have if I have any issues or any trouble or whatever, contacting them or asking for their help is not an issue, that type of stuff. There was really no, hey, they want to kill you, so just be careful when you do anything around them because they'll kill you the first chance they get. Like that was never a talk that I received. And I knew plenty of cops as a kid. It was explained to me why certain things had happened, how there can be racial tension when it comes to police officers or different things like that. It was like this is a possibility. You know what I mean? These things can happen depending on the people because some people are just bad people, But it wasn't cops are evil. They hate you and you're a Negro. So make sure you protect yourself because they hate you Blacks. Like that was never a talk my mom gave me, thankfully. Because, any run-in I did have with the police and Tripta, hilariously enough, if she did ever give me that lesson, it wouldn't have been effective. It wouldn't have worked because all of the worst experiences I've ever had with cops were all with Black cops. Every single one of them. Every memory I have, a bad memory of cops just like overstepping their authority, using unnecessary force or just talking to me like I'm just some piece of shit that doesn't matter. It was always a Black cop every single time.
Well, oddly enough, my father gave me a version of what I think they're referring to as the talk because my father used to be a police officer when he was, obviously much younger. And so when I started learning how to drive, which I still don't do, but regardless, when he was in the passenger seat and he started talking to me about what happens if you get pulled over. And he gave me some war stories of things that had gone wrong during traffic stops because of misunderstandings. And at no point in any of those stories did he bring up the person's race because it didn't matter. It just says you don't do this and you don't do that. A cop pulls you over, you pull over, you keep your hands up on the steering wheel unless or until the officer tells you to do otherwise. You answer the questions, yes, sir, no, sir, and so on. He gave me what I hear a lot of the times is the talk, but it wasn't in the context of, there was a little bit of context of danger. Like if you move too fast or you reach for something without the officer knowing what you're doing, you're putting yourself at a risk. But it was just, and at the time, and I didn't have any context for what he was telling me versus what I hear these days when I hear like the talk for Black people or whatever. But to me, after he laid it out, it was one of those things where I kind of like, yeah, Dad, I get it. Because it just seemed to me common sense, right? Except that advice like that, if it was common sense, it's not very common if you'd have to tell me, right? Because too many people do the opposite. They don't pay attention or they're not courteous or whatever else. It's really just a matter of the guy's doing his job. He doesn't want any trouble. You don't want any trouble. Just go through the motions, get it done, and move on with your day. And he was talking about basically like traffic tickets and stuff. But my dad's seen some shit. He'd seen some shit as a cop. He'd seen some shit in the military. So his perspective was a lot more pragmatic, I think. And it's not, I think everybody, especially I think in driving school, even they give you like, I remember in high school when I had that class you have to go through for like getting your driver's permit or whatever. They put you through the. I think it actually played. Did you ever see the movie Red Asphalt?
Does not ring a bell.
It is this like. I mean, it must be practically a cult film now. It's like this little educational movie they play when they're teaching you the basics of driving, to warn you away from like the mistakes you can make on the road that end up in like death or something.
Right. Okay.
And there was, I swear, maybe it was in that one or something else that they played. Either way, there was a scenario where a cop comes up and says, "Excuse me, sir, I just need to talk to you for a second." And they said, and then Dan reached for his glove compartment for his ID without announcing to the officer that he was getting his ID, and the officer reacted. And then somebody got shot or something. And it's just like, holy shit. It's one of those things they want to scare you straight kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like the edged weapon.
Oh, yeah. Surviving edged weapons. Oh, man. Chat, if you do not know about surviving edged weapons, all I got to say is the best review of that movie is Red Letter Media, and just look up surviving edged weapons and just watch their best of the worst coverage of that. It is amazing.
Also, check out JonTron's video because that shit was hilarious.
Yeah. Anybody who's done a decent review of surviving edged weapons, because that movie by itself is like a classic, just all by itself. It's got everything. It's got death and destruction and Satan worshiping. It's great. Anyway,
that shit was ridiculous.
back to these two,
or the young people that they're bringing up. If I like, they can cousin love each other all they want at this point.
I don't know. Is it Mississippi?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, cousin love. Sorry.
As they age, the depth of and the authenticity of their friendship will erode, because my white daughter will literally not be able to identify with her cousin.
Why?
Because I won't let her.
I hate to sound like a banshee or something. Why would that happen? Why is that a natural progression? Who is telling her that they can't relate to them because of their skin color, might I ask?
Not maybe even believe him when he shares his experiences with her in the world.
Because the cousin's black? Because your daughter's white? Wow. So your daughter being white imparts on her a disbelief of black people that just like becomes stronger with age, like a fine wine or something?
It's just natural.
Are you kidding me?
And she definitely won't be able to stand alongside him or behind him when he needs solidarity from her, right? And so that's just a great example of part of me raising a white child to be anti-racist committed and able to sustain interracial relationships means I have to give her a parallel version of the talk. It's not the same talk he's getting because she's not at risk.
She's not at risk. White people have no fear of anything bad happening to them by the police.
Also, if I don't intervene, obviously her white skin is going to default her to being judgmental of her cousin because of skin color.
Uh-huh.
It's just a natural progression, guys. That's just how it works. We can't be the change we want to see. No. We have to intervene to make sure she understands that if she's not careful, are these people even listening to themselves? I mean,
I think they are, but that might be the problem.
The same way he is, right? She needs to understand what her whiteness means in the world.
Yes.
She needs to understand that she has decisions she can make about how to be in solidarity. And again, I didn't get that mentoring of how to do that from the elders who raised me.
Oh no. God forbid. So then you got woke, right?
But I'm needing to learn right now how to have those conversations with her in support of that friendship. And the more we do that with more of our children collectively, the better our kids will be able in middle school and high school, I hope, to sustain those relationships. But it's some heavy lifting. We have some work to do because if white parents are honest, most of us actually haven't broken out of our own white bubbles in terms of actual, authentic, sustained interracial relationships. And so in some ways, we're asking our kids to do things we have not even figured out how to do ourselves. And so part of it is equipping white children and youth to be really able when it comes to race, to diversity, and to anti-racism, because then they can sustain those friendships. But it doesn't just happen by osmosis or accident, because the forces in our society work against that.
So, white kids are inherently vulnerable to the forces of society that are going to turn them into racists unless you intervene to tell them not to be racist, because they will be racist because they're white.
Sure.
Look how happy she is with herself right there.
Mm.
She's so enlightened.
She's like, did I do it good? Please pat me on the head.
I wonder what would happen. I would love to see, and I know it's probably not going to happen here. I would love to see what would happen if the host, the interviewer, at any point either corrected her or lightly criticized her.
She probably would have told her that she don't really know what she's talking about because she doesn't understand what's really affecting her and how this world is against you. You don't really get it.
I'm just thinking back to that one TEDx where the lady's talking to her, the white lady, because it's important for the story. The white lady's talking to her black friend on the phone, and her black friend asks her how her small daughter is doing, and she says, "Oh yeah, she's doing great. She's thinking about dyeing her hair purple, which I think is wonderful because it gets her away from her blondness."
Mm-hmm.
And then the black friend starts criticizing her for perspective, and she suddenly melts down because she can't take criticism from someone who's black, because obviously that means she's a racist.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about, kids being able to kind of see that, right, from their parents. And I think, in conversations that I've had to prepare for this, there's also this sense of fear from white parents around talking about their race as being white against the backdrop of almost connecting it with being racist, right?
That's your entire argument, though.
Mm.
Okay. For those of you that have not seen it, so there. For those of you that don't know, there is a book out there called "How to Be Anti-Racist." It's written by a guy named Ibram X. Kendi, who's a doctor of something. He runs the Anti-Racism Research Foundation or whatever at Boston University. I did a TED Excellence not too long ago where he was interviewed, and he was asked point blank to define the difference between not being racist and anti-racist. And not being racist is denial, and anti-racist is confession. Because racism is a constant. It is like the first law of thermodynamics. It is just the reality of the situation. You cannot avoid it. Everybody has it, especially white people. And to deny that you are racist is obviously denial. It's like saying the earth is flat. You're being a conscious denier of reality. Okay. So when our interviewer here talks about like somehow being white is connected to racism, that is the entire basis of the theory of anti-racism. So it's surprising to me that she would even suggest that there's a possibility that being white is somehow disconnected from racism, or that anybody could be disconnected from racism, if we're talking about the theory of anti-racism.
Mm-hmm.
I want to interject there because my education from Dr. Kendi runs flat into the wall of what she just said.
Right?
Right.
That fear of talking about who they are because of the connection it has to Black and Brown communities, and how the whole diversity and inclusion and race and anti-racism conversations are happening. So what sort of advice can you give white parents as being able to give the truth of where the society is and still creating a sense of self and confidence for their children as well. Because I think that's the same struggle that Black and brown parents have to create that sense of, you are amazing, you are smart, you are all of these things in spite of what we see there. And so how do those conversations look on the flip side for white families?
Okay, so now we're going to get some advice for white parents as to how to talk to their kids about race without necessarily admitting to being racist. Because we're going to focus on race, and to focus on race obviously isn't a component towards being racist.
That's how
Is that right? That sound about right?
Sound about right.
Okay, here we go. Let's hear this priceless advice.
That question is brilliant because you
Is it? Was it? Okay.
Named the precise conundrum, right? Because whereas you describe, families of color needing to say to their kids and the young people in their lives, you are brilliant, you are beautiful, you are amazing.
What if your kid is stupid, ugly, and dumb? I know I'm doing a Bill Burr kind of thing, but still, I can't help it.
Stupid, ugly, and mediocre.
Yes, mediocre, exactly. Yeah, I know why I said dumb. Mediocre is a better word. I don't know. I get the pepper jacks hit me pretty hard now, guys. The idea of coddling your kid. Encouraging them, etc. But where's the line between being encouraging and being honest? Because if your kid ends up being, grows up to be 5'6", they're probably not going to make it to the NBA. You're just going to have to be honest with your kid about that. Scottie Pippen aside, and so on. But still, it's probably not going to happen. Is there a line between being overly encouraging and being realistic with your kid that you have to sort of watch? I'm assuming you're thinking about these things too at some point.
Well, yeah, of course. It's possible, and people think it's an either or. You either have to encourage every single thing your child wants to do ever, or you have to be 100% real with them and crush them. You don't have to. It's not an either or. You can tell somebody, look, if this is what you want to pursue, I support you. You should pursue it and give it your 100% at all times. Do the best as you can. But realistically, you need to make sure you have a backup plan. You need to make sure that you have other things in place. Something else that you think you might want to do as a fallback, because there is a possibility that this might not work out. I'm going to support you in this endeavor as much as possible. But, eventually, if we hit that point to where this is not working out, then we got to move on, and I think that's reasonable enough. Any reasonable person would be like, that's fine. You know? So it don't have to be an either or, even if you think this is a fool's errand, this is a complete waste of time. I know it's not going to work out, because your kid's going to have to find out at some point. They got to learn,
But in this context, they're talking about it simply on the basis, again, of race.
Right.
Not merit or their own personal interests or anything else, but talking honestly with them about the reality and based on their race, not on their interests, not on their talents, not on their strength or their weaknesses.
Hey, Monk.
Hey, Monkey. Hey, guys, on the way to nap, but wanted to like and say hi. Thank you, Monkey. Get a good nap, because we'll have a show later on. Thank you. This is Kyle. You can encourage your kids. Just be realistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, encourage them until the point where, either they realize that this isn't working out, or they look for you to. And again, I'm talking out of school here because I'm not a parent, but I'm just thinking back to things that happened in my own life with my parents. Mm-hmm. And now my father was very distant for various reasons. My mother was very encouraging. But, when it reached a point where something wasn't working out, she'd be like, well, maybe you can try something else. Mm-hmm. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She didn't focus in on the failure or try to push me beyond my limit or something to sort of satisfy her own I don't know, hopes and dreams with me vicariously or whatever. Thankfully, I didn't have one of those parents. But yeah, I mean, it was always sort of what would you like to do? We'll try that out. And they never prevented me from trying anything. And they kind of just let me learn at my own pace. Did I like it enough to keep going? Did I fall out of love with it? And then move on. There wasn't really any pressure. One way or the other that I can remember. And I don't know, maybe there was a healthier strategy for it. I don't know. That's what worked for me. And I don't have any like terrible memories of like being pushed beyond my boundaries or not being encouraged if I did find interest in something.
And allowing your kids to fail is like a very fundamental part of growing up. Like they need to understand what it is and what it means to fail so they can learn how to pick themselves back up afterwards.
Yeah.
If you don't let them do that, then when it finally does happen to them as a dysfunctional ass adult.
Well, the other thing too, and I think this might be my having grown up on the tail end of a societal change. I still grew up in a time where my parents and most of the parents around me let kids go wander on their own. Like I could, it's like I'd be like, Mom, I'm going to go to the comic book store, right? And the comic book store was 2.5 miles down the road, down the hill, and in town. And I'd be all by myself. I wouldn't have a guardian. I wouldn't have a cell phone. I wouldn't have any way to check in. This, of course, before cell phones and everything. I feel like an old man saying that, but it's true. You know, I really, and I'm sure there's enough data by now to say otherwise. I'm really curious to know what that change in attitude has had as an effect on kids as they grow up in their own independence and moving through the world, just literally.
Right.
Whether or not that's stunting. And admittedly, not every parent coddles their kids that way, but some parents don't have a choice because there are some communities out there, neighborhoods or otherwise, if they see a kid below a certain age wandering around alone, they'll call the cops and then charge the parents with neglect or something because they let the kid go out to the park by themselves at 3 p.m.
Right.
Which is just boggles my mind, but I guess I come from a different era. Anyway, all these tangents.
In order to ensure they're thriving in the wake of, you know, white racism, essentially. Adults of white kids, parents of white kids, we have this challenge. It doesn't play the same. We need to not be telling our kids, you're amazing, you're wonderful.
Really? Really? Okay, I'm gonna call. I gotta back up a bit here. I gotta back up a second.
Oh my God.
Okay. I'm gonna just to be safe. A couple extra seconds.
Confidence for their children as well, because I think that's the same struggle that Black and brown parents have to create that sense of you are amazing, you are smart, you are all of these things in spite of what we see there. And so how do those conversations look on the flip side for white families?
That question is brilliant because you've named the precise conundrum, right? Because whereas you describe, you know, families of color needing to say to their kids and the young people in their lives, you are brilliant, you are beautiful, you are amazing, in order to ensure they're thriving in the wake of, you know, white racism, essentially. Adults of white kids, parents of white kids, we have this challenge. It doesn't play the same. We need to not be telling our kids, you're amazing, you're wonderful, in a racial key, right? Because they already have those sort of society reflective false notions of white superiority flashing back at them all the time. So this is a real.
Wow.
Can we pause? Because she said we need not to be telling our kids that in a racial key. Are you specifically stating that the only reason Black people say that to their kids is because they're Black? They're amazing, they're wonderful, they're special, they're incredible because your skin is dark. Because that's what she's implying there. That's what she's saying, is that Black people tell their kids that because of the color of their skin.
Or in the alternative, the idea is that you have to tell Black kids that in order to compensate for their inherent flaw or something.
Right. Like
you have to build them up because otherwise they're not going to have those notions of self-worth.
Yeah. That's basically white people don't have to do that to their kids. They already know they're superior. They're already superior by default. So we have to tell our inferior kids that they're great. And then white people need to stop telling their superior kids that they're better, so that way they can feel like our kids feel. Like, really?
And the other thing too she just did is that if my kids feel some sort of sense of superiority because they're white, it's not my fault they think that way. It's society's fault for having pushed onto them the notion that they're superior.
Right.
Because I'm not responsible for raising my kid. I'm not responsible for instilling values in them. No. They are victims. I am a victim of society.
Yep. Not my fault. Society.
Holy cats, man.
Really important question that gets at the reality that white adults are also ourselves having to learn and work through some of the same developmental processes that we need to help our kids through. So
processes. Sorry, I'm English major kicks in. Processes. That's the plural. Well, I might be a snob there. I'm sure somebody in the chat will correct me, but that's how I've always been told, and I'm always right.
So that, for example, in my 20s, I wallowed in white guilt.
Imagine that. I can't believe it. Really, you? Of all people? And I think Drew W., no one looks up to LeBron at all. I know, right? Yeah, you have to tell him he's awesome, because otherwise he's not going to believe it. Right? I guess. I don't know.
Science?
Right? White guilt is a developmentally normal, predictable white response when we start to realize we're white, we believe in equality and equity, and we're benefiting all the time from injustice.
When you start to realize that you're white, you automatically, when you start to, with the moment you look in the mirror and realize that you are a white person, immediately you become guilty that you exist. That's what this stupid bitch just said.
Well, in her reality, when you learn that you're white, you're also learning about white privilege. So then you have to admit to the inherent reality of your advantages, your inborn advantages on the basis of your skin color. I keep coming back, and a couple of people in chat have brought this up before. Did you ever see that interview with Morgan Freeman and Mike Wallace?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and for those of you that haven't, look up Morgan Freeman, Mike Wallace interview on race or whatever. It's a relatively brief segment, but it really does say a lot. And Morgan Freeman, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, like, Mike Wallace asked him, what do we do about racism? And he's like, stop talking about it. I'll be Morgan Freeman, you be Mike Wallace, and all the other things go aside, because at the end of the day, we are individual people, and all the surface stuff is irrelevant. God forbid we interact with each other on that basis, right? But no, our speaker here wants us. I mean, it's just this reverse thing. It's like she in her teachings is fueling the very thing that she says is the great evil by pointing out and dwelling on racial difference, as though that means anything in the first place, but just racial difference, and educating people on it, and imploring parents to focus on this. She is helping to add to the mental and quote unquote societal divisions that she's lamenting as the reason why she needs to educate her kids. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I suppose if I want to be really cynical about it, and God knows I could be, it helps perpetuate her career. If you tell everybody that they are sick and that you possess the cure for them to be well, you will never stop having a paycheck. Anyway.
One of the developmental antidotes to guilt is to move into action and to learn to act with others, to learn that our whiteness does not have to be the determining factor in terms of our ability to commit to racial justice.
But it is a determining factor in our character and our value in society. I have to believe that my skin color is a determining factor of certain aspects of myself, but I don't have to believe in that in order to act against what I'm told is inherent to my makeup. I don't even know if what I said just made any sense, but it made more sense than that, I think.
Right.
Oh, Pepperjack, you make things so entertainingly muddy.
Right?
Right.
So as a parent, part of my work, I think, is to support my kids in getting through and being partnered with the sort of guilt stuff that comes up when you realize you've inherited these legacies. I didn't cause the legacy of white racism in this nation.
Oh, no, you didn't cause it. You're just helping to carry it forward. That's all. And instilling similar things in your kids for the benefit of everybody else because it's benevolent racism. Okay.
But I did inherit benefits that come with it, whether I wanted to or not. And so my journey as a parent is to walk with my children as they contend with those very painful truths, but not leave them there, to then also walk with them and show them that you can choose anti-racist commitment in response to those legacies and how they shape all of our lives. And that white guilt it's not the point. The point isn't to feel bad. The point is to choose to journey with others to create a world of justice for all of us.
But don't you have to inherently feel bad because you're white, or else the whole thing falls apart?
Right. That's a part of it. If you don't feel guilty, why would you feel you need to do something about it?
Right. Why do I need to act if I don't feel that I have any particular stake for or against the problem? Again, guys, I'm not doing a bingo card for this one because this isn't technically, well, it's not even technically, it's not a TEDx talk. It is a talks at Google. But, you know, contradicting her own point, you could circle that square if you wanted to. And again, if you are following along with the bingo card and you do fill it out and you do get a bingo or more on this one, by all means, fill it out and tweet it at me after the show. And I will share it with everyone because doing the Google Talk thing here is an experiment. I may do more in the future, depending. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So tell me again how white guilt doesn't matter when it totally matters.
And the reason that is so important for white parents to understand is that what you're talking about right now, how this can manifest for kids, when we don't talk about and admit and acknowledge the real challenge of white identity and how it does raise feelings of guilt or confusion or whatever, if we're trying to be committed to equality, but we're also benefiting from injustice, what happens, we know, is that in the teenage years, our children become very vulnerable to forces in this country that would like to prey on white guilt with young kids and youth and turn it to their own ends.
What are you doing?
That's interesting.
What else do you have to further your belief system except white guilt? You are instilling in your own children a sense of white guilt because it's obvious that they have these advantages, right? So are they supposed to feel proud of having these advantages? No. You encourage them to see these advantages as an inherent evil that they have to sort of bear the burden of in order to then act and use these advantages for the betterment of those less fortunate than they are, who are obviously people who aren't white because they are inherently less fortunate. But now, we have to defend our children against people who would take advantage of that white guilt for their own ends.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is another one of those. This is another one of those. These are my sheep, not yours. Situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is exactly one of those scenarios, and they're like, those are our people. Like, we are supposed to be manipulating them, not you, and we can't let others get to them. So, if you want to be able to exploit these people and utilize their vulnerabilities based off their white guilt, we need to get to them first. We can't let the others get to them because they'll use them for their own means. But so yeah, this is definitely, those are my sheep, not yours.
I really hope she right now, I hope she tells us what those evil ends are that the other people would try to use white guilt-ridden children towards? I would really like to know, and then compare them to what she's already said previously.
So I want white teenagers to know that when they go into a school and they're being told that diversity is a value, that we value diversity, and then they're like, okay, but I don't get to value my whiteness. What do I do with that?
Nobody says that.
Who the fuck? Who? I sound like an owl here. Who says that?
Nobody. Nobody fucking says that.
You know who does say that? Somebody who comes from an actually white supremacist family. A kid who actually grew up with parents who were virulently white supremacists. Like, why doesn't my whiteness get valued here? Here's the flip side. If you come from let's say, and I know I'm living in white supremacist, and you are a white kid, and you go into a school that promotes diversity, but diversity as defined as people who aren't white need beneficial treatment because they need a hand up, and then you start engendering some kind of like bad feeling between the races on the basis of unequal treatment. Again, self-fulfilling prophecy. Thank you, Drew W. Again, advantages they will never give up. Well, they can't give them up. I mean, it's branded on them as their melanin count. They cannot give it up. Wade Willison says, "Whoa, you're cutting in and out pretty bad there, Scribelight." Are you on a phone app? Oh, was I? Oh shit.
Yeah, just a little bit,
now?
But yeah, you're good now. It was just that little bit of roboting you had there.
Okay, well, if that keeps up, let me know, because I can't hear it, obviously.
Yeah, well, I was gonna mention it, but it didn't last, so I was just like, all right, I'll leave it alone because I know how Scribe gets.
Well, it's one of those things, like, you know this. If you can't hear it and you don't know it, you have somebody else tell you, you have no idea of any way of measuring it. So, okay,
all right.
Maybe my volume was being too high. My microphone was not handling it. All right, lost my train of thought. We'll just continue.
I want them to know that there are white anti-racist committed humans that would love to journey with them through that challenge so that they're less likely to go, this whole diversity thing, I don't get any of it. So I'm actually going to go embrace my whiteness, and I'm going to embrace it in ways that anyone on this call, right, is explicitly going, oh my gosh, we need to stop this, right? And so this is another reason that whether we feel equipped in this moment or not, adults who have white children in our lives have to start talking with them about the real challenges that being white creates when you start to contend with the legacies that we all as white Americans have inherited. Because otherwise that guilt or that, guilt gets sublimated, and it ends up turning into anger that gets directed at people of color very easily. And that right now in this nation is a crisis.
Okay.
Look at her face. She's like, yeah.
I totally nailed it. And again, I know this, I'm gonna sound like a broken record saying this, but I wonder if people like Dr. Harvey ever like stop, go back, and actually listen to what they said. Listen to the things that they're already put. The inherent contradictions of her own statements. The unavoidable endpoint of what she's suggesting people actually teach their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the assumption that, if you're white and you walk into a situation like this, that, or the other, and you get frustrated, obviously you're going to go put a hood on and start burning crosses.
Yeah. As long as you don't get to celebrate white supremacy, you'll be upset because, it's bullshit.
Yeah. Don't promote white supremacy. Just understand that you as a white person inherently possess advantages that other people don't.
Right.
I can never get over that. I can't just get over that.
Isn't it amazing how that works? It's fascinating, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for naming that piece, right?
Right. Every time, I got to say this to other people who watch the channel for a while. Now that I do these live streams, I don't actually have the ability to edit as I go. Every time someone says "right" with a question mark in it, I want to insert Cenk Uygur going right. I want to. In my mind, I am. And I know some of you out there who have listened and seen my videos as long as you have, I've conditioned you to imagine Cenk saying that. So I take a little bit of evil credit for that. But just so you know, when someone constantly is looking for this passive affirmation from their audience, and I understand some people do it as sort of a reflexive filler, stopgap kind of thing. I get it. It's not always the case. But when someone's making an argument and they do it constantly, it says something to me a lot about the person's psyche. And maybe I'm making assumptions. Well, obviously I am making assumptions, but it's always interesting to me. Thank you, Mikhail, the Driving 8-Man. Kids shouldn't be around this racist. I wonder, morbidly wonder, what is going to happen to Dr. Harvey's children as they grow up, as they hopefully grow up into their own sense of self, not race, but self, and start hopefully thinking for themselves outside of her tutelage. I mean, will they be dyed-in-the-wool true believers and carry her mindset forward, or will they rebel at some point? And I wonder how she would handle any resistance to her teachings. I mean, would she brand her own kids as hopeless racists if they ever disagreed with her?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
How youth can internalize what they see, and if there isn't a positive place for them to process that, then they are prey for other individuals, organizations, ideologies that can continue the divide and the crisis that we are seeing.
Like yours? It's one of those things where I'd love to be like seeing somebody on a stage and have question time and be able to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
How is telling kids? Well, I mean, I don't really need to fill in the blank here because I've said it 3 times now. But I mean, just and I really wonder, like, is there ever an instance where they ever get any pushback? Even like a professional pushback, not like some kind of like Twitter, like you're an asshole kind of thing or something, but just like a reasonable, intelligent question. Like, if you truly believe in what you're saying, if you truly believe that you have lived your life in a position of privilege, unearned, bestowed upon you by society, and so on, first and foremost, doesn't your degree mean nothing?
Mm-hmm.
Your title of doctor has to be suspect, doesn't it? Because at every point in the course of your education, certification, diplomas, and so on, has to have been pushed by the wind of white privilege. And besides which, if you're telling every kid, or you're advocating that parents tell their kids that there is a difference between white kids and kids who aren't white, that there is something to consider, that white kids shouldn't be encouraged or told that they're good, because God forbid they be told that, since society's doing that already. You don't want to add to it.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you promoting the very racial divide that you say you're trying to cure?
No, they're repairing it.
Yeah.
They're repairing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you talk about talking the talk, right, for parents, but what does walking the walk look like, right? We talk about, we want diversity. We want to have, our friends to be diverse, our dinner table to be diverse, our neighborhoods, right?
Our dinner table.
The schools that our kids go to, maybe we talk about it, but are we actually walking that? So how can we desegregate our lives so that it's not just performative around talking about wanting diversity or saying that we are diverse because we live in certain diverse neighborhoods that are having...
Sorry, what?
I can answer this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Segregation, of course.
Oh, is that the walking the walk?
That's the answer. How do we stop the segregation of our dinner tables and all that type of stuff? The answer that these type of people have given us is segregation. That's the answer they gave to us, remember?
Well, I am ridiculously aware of the idea of affinity groups towards solving racism.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys don't know what an affinity group is, you can look back in a couple of my videos to, I think it was 1 or 2 back on the Curriculum of Fear playlist, called Color Coded.
Mm-hmm.
And then a TEDx prior to that with the, what would I call it? Like Consciously Caucasian or something. And this idea of affinity groups where like, well, in order to spell out to people the racism in the world, you need to split everybody up in groups by race, especially in schools.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids can experience what it is to see. Honestly, my mind stops at that point because I can't even reasonably articulate what the logic is behind that. If your goal is to somehow ease racial tensions, dividing students or employees up on the basis of race and for no other reason. But okay, so Satsu says walking the walk, the virtue signal that is necessary here is to actually divide people up on the basis of race. Let's see what Dr. Harvey has to say.
Really harmful impact for the Black and brown communities that were originally there, for instance, right? That it's performative and that it looks diverse on the surface. But if you actually had a conversation with like a parent and a kid about how diverse their life really is, that can really, really tell the truth about what's going on and what we actually put into action versus what we say.
Yeah, let's interrogate everybody. Like, how many non-white friends do you have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I've got a scorecard here, so you have to be at least this diverse to ride this ride. Is that honestly at this point? I'd like to ask the interviewer, functionally, what does that interrogation look like? What exactly is the metric by which, just on an observational level, because you can't necessarily interrogate every person, but on an observational level, you see someone walking down the street who's white. How do you know that they're not a racist? What do you need to know in order to look at that person and not immediately suspect that they're evil in their character?
Well, I'll just say this. The simple fact that you think that there is a possibility that you could look at a white person and assume that they are not racist shows your white privilege.
I know. God damn it. I'm in denial. In the anti-racism model, just imagining someone who isn't racist or isn't guided by racism is blasphemy.
Right. Your white privilege enables you to believe that that is a possibility when in fact it literally isn't.
God, how dare I? How dare I assume, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, that people are inherently good or want to do good or at the very least want to leave each other alone and let them live their own lives. Damn my white privilege.
Yeah. So I think that one of the first things we need to do, white Americans, is really acknowledge that anytime we say, and me too, anytime I say, because this is still true in my life, there's, of course, for all of us who are in white America, how do I do this? This organization or this neighborhood it's mostly white people. So how do I even learn to do any of this? We need to acknowledge that the forces of segregation in this nation are deep and thick and ancient.
Systemic. Yeah.
Systemic. No organization or neighborhood or school system shows up predominantly white by accident.
Oh. Thank you. This is Kyle. What if you don't have friends colored or white? Well, if your only friend is yourself, look in the mirror, and that tells you exactly how racist you are.
That's right.
Okay, so Dr. Harvey is telling us that everything is a conspiracy theory. Any organization, any geographical territory, whatever, that has, a predominantly white population, it was planned for.
Yeah,
It was intended by design. Right, by design. Okay, this is what I'm learning. All right, so everything is inherently racist, right? Well, I mean, she is an anti-racist, so everything has to be inherently racist for her entire shtick to even operate. Okay.
It all has a history sitting right there underneath it that is, also today, right?
Right.
When we acknowledge that, I think that can be helpful to then say, okay, whether I'm in a diverse school system or neighborhood or
but even if I'm so wait, why are there diverse school systems or neighborhoods?
Mm-hmm.
Why do those things exist? I mean, how could they exist? Okay, maybe I'm missing something.
Or a predominantly white one. I need to pick my head up, look around, and say, where in my local community are Black and brown communities saying racial harm is happening here? Racial redress is needed here. This policy is hurting Black families, is impacting Latinx, Latino, and Latina communities.
Oh, there's 3 of them now? I thought Latinx was like the all-encompassing to avoid genderfying the Latin culture. That's a separate thing, but I was under the impression that Latinx was to replace any other reference because it was not inclusive. I'm learning something new every day.
Even in predominantly white spaces, we don't have to look very far to find Black and brown leaders saying those kinds of things and actually organizing against those kinds of things. So one of the most important high level of integrity things we can do as white Americans.
Okay, high level integrity. All right. I want to know how I can increase my personal integrity as a white person, given that since I am a white person, I inherently lack integrity of some kind. Okay, here we go.
Is in our own local communities, literally show up and get involved in support of the work that Black and brown people are doing all over the country.
Okay, so I need to find a Black or brown person doing something and get involved. Because they can't do it on their own? Why would they want my help, given my inherent racism?
There's no way you can trust those freaking people to do it on their own. They'll never figure it out on their own. They need your help.
But isn't my getting involved, isn't that just obviously I'm just being a poser?
No.
I'm just trying to alleviate my white guilt that I obviously possess. I mean, anything that I do for a Black or brown person or organization led by such is just me trying to divest myself of my white guilt. I mean, it's probably disingenuous, really, because ultimately, being a white person, I'm going to look down upon those people, since obviously they need my help to succeed, because obviously they couldn't do it on their own, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Midnight in Exile. Which is easier, a Black person getting included in a white community or a white person getting included in a Black community?
It depends on the community.
Depends on the community. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about like Mississippi rednecks with grandfathers in the KKK. Probably a bit of a tough sell on that side. You're talking about Black Lives Matter, hardcore over in like Baltimore or something. Probably a hard sell there too.
Yeah, it depends on the community. It's once again, the race is not the determining factor of it.
Exactly.
It is the experience of the people in that group. That's the determining factor, because you could bring a white person into an all Black neighborhood and they fucking welcome them with open arms, and vice versa. It really just depends. So you got to be careful with questions like that, because it leads you down the same path that these people are taking, where the assumption is based on race, there's an obvious answer, and there's not.
Well, and that also comes the same distinction I've had to draw time and time again on TED Excellences and otherwise, the difference between a group and a demographic.
Right.
To say the Black community is to somehow call everyone who has dark skin part of the same mindset, the same inherent geography, experience, perspective, and so on, which is absolutely not true. You can't honestly say that and then proceed with your whatever your statement is.
Right.
You can talk about a specific group, as in like a neighborhood, an organization. Yeah, a group and a demographic are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A white person in America is not the same as a white person in Russia or in South Africa. They don't inherently share the same values, perspective, experiences, just on the basis of their skin color. And I know that Midnight Exile was being a little bit facetious there.
Right, of course.
But all the same, I mean, but that is something that needs to be pointed out. At least I feel needs to be pointed out again and again, because it's used so often. This conflation of the ideas of group and demographic. An organization or some kind of small unit that has a shared perspective on the world, and then just generalizing about an entire category of human being on the basis of one attribute or something. Which, anyway. Sorry to preach, but it's just something that really bugs me. And those of you that have watched TED Excellences in the past, I get a little twitchy when it comes to group versus demographic.
And performativity is always a risk. It just is.
Uh-huh.
And so we need to go in those spaces if we're welcome there. In many, many spaces we are.
Are really? I mean,
wait a minute. Now, the interesting thing about me is, or about this whole situation, I guess, is she specifically just said we need to go into those spaces if we're welcome. But the assumption is that Black people should be welcomed in all spaces regardless. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no scenario where they shouldn't be. It should be diverse. They should be welcome and expected. Not only welcome, but expected to be included in everything, no matter what. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right, and it's because you hate them. But white people, no. You only insert yourself into this space if you're welcome. And you can only be welcome based on if your overlords tell you that you're allowed to be there. Otherwise, you stay in your place, white person.
Yeah, deference to racial segregation is a white person's obligation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's evil.
Yeah, it's fascinating how unbelievably and transparently racist most of their talking points are. And it's all to combat racism.
Yeah, and something else that I often see and people talking about the definition of racism. Racism can be the elevation or the denigration of someone on the basis of race. It can also be the denigration of your own race. It can be self-hatred. Someone saying, I'm terrible because I'm white is a racist. And that's essentially what she's doing here. She's saying, I am a lesser person on the basis of my race. I have to be deferential to anyone who might counter me on the basis of my race because I admit that I am inherently flawed. And anybody who is not of the same melanin count as me has more credibility than I do. And then there's also the point where I look at this lady and I think, I feel kind of sad for her. She has convinced herself, and unfortunately, probably her children, that there is a scar on their soul they will never escape. It is original sin. It's the unavoidable detriment to your very being that you will always have to give apology for as you move through the world and to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that, a lot of fates I would not wish upon my worst enemy. That's one of them. I think, and I've seen it in my real life. I've seen people who I encountered who were terrible people to me at a certain point in life, and then they grew up. They got some perspective on things, and they realized how terrible they'd been and became a better person.
Right.
But if you're told from birth that you'll never, ever be good enough, and you have that reinforced over and over again by people who you trust, you never really will be. It's a terrible way to live.
And it's
If
like
we show
it is.
No, go ahead.
It is incredibly ironic that, based off of historical experience, the stuff that people have witnessed and seen that's going on, all the historical history and stuff that we have on this stuff, people can say this works. We know that this type of indoctrination works, which is why we do it to white people. Like, we've seen it. We've seen it happen to Black people. We know the effects, which is specifically why we are prioritizing doing this to white people, because it's not about getting on equal footing. It's about trading places. It's their turn to feel this.
Yeah, as though two wrongs somehow make a right.
Right.
And it never does. Like, like there's this notion like getting even for the evils of history. It's like, but the evils of history are all dead. Why don't you take people on as they are today, as society is today? Why isn't there a recognition of how far we've come? I just did this in the other video where the guy was talking about Toy Story as a slave narrative, right? And at the very end of that talk, as short as it was, he brought up the movie The Toy, which is like from 1976 or something, starring Richard Pryor and Jackie Gleason. And the whole plot of The Toy was Jackie Gleason, this really rich father, white guy, finds this out of work, down and out, I think he was an accountant or something, Richard Pryor, and literally buys him as an entertainment for his son. Okay. And as far as it being a slave narrative, it's far more apt than Toy Story as a slave narrative, because he's literally buying a person to service a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that the guy obviously I think if he'd gone any further, would have to have faced is, would that movie from 1970 whatever have any opportunity to be made today? Would it be praised today? Would it be thought of as a good movie or something that was of an entertainment to people? No, not at all. You have to acknowledge the fact that the people today are not the people of yesterday. Two wrongs don't make a right, and somehow you're not balancing the karmic scales by punishing someone today for the sins of someone who's hundreds of years dead.
And also, too, just a small correction, because you said like the evils of before are dead. They're on life support.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It's not okay. I didn't mean to say like all racism is eradicated. They don't exist anymore. I didn't mean like that. But
I just wanted to make sure you weren't misunderstood in that regard, because I know what you meant.
Yeah.
But people will be like, "Oh, we heard what you said." It's like, well, they're not gone, they're not dead, but they are on life support, and we have the evidence that you literally just brought up. There's no way in hell a movie like that could be made right now.
Yeah. And what happens every time that someone is called a racist? What happens every time that there is a white cop who shoots a black person before we even know the details of the circumstances? What is society's reaction? What was society's reaction to voting for a black man into the presidency 2 times in a row?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, if you're being at least intellectually honest, as someone in Dr. Harvey's position or otherwise, you cannot be taken seriously if you do not admit that things have come light years from just 50 years ago. Well, hell, 30 years ago. I mean, when I was growing up versus now, in general terms, admittedly, things really feel like they've taken 17 steps backwards, especially since Dr. Harvey has a career here and is taken seriously as some kind of intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I don't know. It just, I never really felt like it was anything to worry about, because the stuff I was seeing on TV, the movies I was watching, the friends that I had, it didn't even come up. Maybe I lived in some kind of blessed bubble in the community that I had. I had friends who were Asian. I had friends who were black. The heroes I saw on cartoons. There was this cartoon, you guys probably don't even know about it, those of you who are younger than me. It was called Cops, and not the TV show about actually following around reality TV. It was called Cops. It was like this cartoon that was set in the future with like cyborgs and fighting crime, and the leader of the police force was a black guy. And when I think about that, it just came across my YouTube the other day, because YouTube likes to throw things at me. It brought up like, do you remember Cops? And I was like, I do. And it never seemed odd to me that he was leading the team growing up. It's one of those things that's sort of like, in retrospect, like, imagine if that had been the case today. They'd be playing up the fact, oh, look, we have a cartoon with a strong black lead. I didn't need to be told that when I was a kid. He was just a guy doing a job.
Yeah. And these people think it's their responsibility for you to see that and be like, wow, that's a normal thing. I'm okay with it. It's their job to come in and slap you on the hand and say, no, that Negro should not be there. It's not a good thing, or not that it's not a good thing, but that's totally rare and unique, and that never happens. Right. It needs to happen more, and you should be angry about.
Isn't it exceptional that a black man would be put in charge of a police force? Isn't it exceptional that he was able to rise to that level, given his inherent disadvantage? Fuck you. I'm sorry. I'm not talking to you, talking to the audience. I'm talking to that whole fucking notion. Fuck you and all that. Fuck you. All you're doing is adding to the problem. That's all you're doing. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. I always picture a scale, but instead of balancing, people always seem to want the scale to tip in their favor. There's always a thumb on the scale, but here's the image that I have, especially when we're listening to Dr. Harvey. There's a scale, and on one hand, you have white people, and on the other hand, you have anybody who's not white. And Dr. Harvey, from what she's saying is, she's got her white thumb on the scale for the not white people because they need the help.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I imagine that. Okay. I know we're early, but I'm already burning out on this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got a little less than 10 minutes left. Shall I continue with the video or just call it here, take questions? What do you want to do, Satsu?
We can call it here and take some questions.
Okay. So timestamp is 28 minutes, 53 seconds. All right. Well, while we're waiting for any questions or comments, do you want to keep going with this and do another part at some point?
There's a part of me that is kind of curious to see, because like, what was the point of bringing up kids in a racially unjust America, right?
Yes.
Like, what more could they say about it at this point?
Well, here, let me at least get to the point where she finishes her statement, and then we can call it. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to herky jerk here a little bit, but let me, just for the sake of completion, if we don't end up doing a third part on this, at least get her last thought out.
Support of the work that Black and brown people are doing all over the country. And performativity is always a risk. It just is. And so we need to go in those spaces if we're welcome there. In many, many spaces we are, if we show up and sort of, reflect humility and a willingness to learn and don't sort of take over, right?
Uh-huh.
But we say to ourselves, this is not going to be a one-off. I'm going to go to this civic organization, or I'm going to partner with this church, or whatever the group is, right? And no matter what happens, even if I'm a little uncomfortable at first, even if I feel like I'm outside my sort of normal wheelhouse, I'm going to stay. I'm going to say, I'm committing to this community or this space for a significant period of time. Because over time, what will happen if we do that is we will, if we're in that space, learn new things, develop some new relationships. Our thinking will get changed.
But will those relationships last given the inherent division between white people and everybody else? Oh, sorry, I'm calling back to what you said earlier, where interracial relationships obviously have to break down to a certain point.
Right.
Okay.
And pretty soon we'll start to know, when I, Jen Harvey, moved to Des Moines, Iowa from Brooklyn, New York, which was a very big change in my life. And everyone said to me, oh, this space is so white, and this space is so white because Iowa's so white. Well, within a couple of years, I was like, wait a second, Iowa is not so white. Yes, the state is very white, but Des Moines is very diverse.
So Des Moines is inherently better than the rest of Iowa then? Is everybody in Iowa who's not living in Des Moines therefore racist? Well, obviously, anti-racist theory says everybody's racist. Can you hear the tiredness in my voice at this point?
Because it's like I said, man, like, look, Iowa's not very white. Yes, it is racially white. Then it is. It is.
Who cares? And what does that say about Iowa? What is that? What inherent conclusion can you come to about Iowa on that basis, Dr. Harvey?
Dude, the fucking highway patrol has been counting how many Negroes show up at any given time and making sure that they keep it at a respectable number. That's
they got a little clicker like they do
Yeah.
at lines, like theaters and stuff. A little, like a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
It's just really segregated. And so the more
Oh.
I learned to choose desegregation, the more I discovered, there's tons of things happening among communities of color in Des Moines, Iowa. And many of the places that white folks live are like that. Segregation literally makes us not even know who's in our own community. And so choosing to find Black and Brown led organizations and spaces, if we are welcome there, and deciding I'm going to participate and I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay in it. And I'm going to take my kids along.
Oh, yeah.
And then pretty soon our experience of what even our local community is might start to change. And more importantly, we're resourcing and supporting the leadership and justice work that's going on all over the country all the time.
Okay, I'll call it there as the end of her statement. 30 minutes, 45 seconds. We're just about halfway through this thing. I don't know. I just
boy.
Yeah. All right, chat. We'll discuss whether we'll do a part 3 at some point here, either online or offline, either way. But let's see. Dr. No, Scribe and Satsu, when will this SJW garbage end? As in what year? It's never going to go away. It will wane back and forth in prevalence. It will rise and reduce in mainstream thinking. It's never going to go away. I mean, and truth be told, this kind of stuff has always been here in a way. It's just been on the fringe, relatively speaking, for a very long time. But now it's roaring into prominence because of, well, just, sort of a perfect storm of different things and people looking for power grabs on the basis of race. But I mean, just like with any overblown ideology, there are seeds of truth in there. Is there a need for, let's say, just reform in police procedure and policy when it comes to use of force? Yes, there has been for years. Well, this isn't anything new. So if you admit to that, are you then admitting that Black Lives Matter is right in everything? No. Is there racism in the world? Yes, there has been. There always will be. Does it operate to the degree that I'm being told every day that it does in our current society? Hell no.
I can answer that. If it did, then you wouldn't have to fucking tell me about it.
Right. It'd be obvious. And here's the thing. And I talked about this in one of the other TEDx's. Somebody talking about the arguing against color blindness, and how anybody who's preaching color blindness in an obviously racist society is doing harm, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, okay, let's say we did live in an obviously, admittedly, totally and absolutely racially segregated racist society. We're all suddenly time traveled back to 1952 in Alabama. Okay. If I was actually practicing the idea of not assessing people on the basis of their skin color, even in an environment and a society that told me otherwise, what is wrong with being the change I want to see? How is that inherently detrimental?
Because it's not the actual change that they want to see. Because, for example, if you're looking at job applications and you take no consideration into the type of name you're looking at, or the way it's spelled or anything like that, or there's no consideration into race. You look at specifically 100% qualifications, and that's how you do all of your hiring, period. You look at who's best for the job, and that's it, and take no consideration into the type of names you see or what color they may be. That sounds like it's what they want you to do. Yes, that's how you should do it because that's fair, but wrong. You shouldn't do it that way. When you saw those Black-looking names or Latino-looking names or Asian-looking names, you should have took notice because you should have hired them instead because of their race and color. You should have, but because you didn't, that's the problem. Now, if you came to the consideration out of merit and just happened to pick a black person, we could still be happy about that, sure, because they still got picked, and we'll just call it whatever we want. But if you still ended up picking a white person, we could just say, yeah, well, either way it goes, bias still kicked in, because even after you decided not to consider any of those things, you still picked a white person. So I guess it's inherent, and you just can't do anything about it, right? This game that they play is very easy to play, because the rules can change at any moment.
Yeah. And no matter what side of it is, no matter what they say, if you're on the opposite side, you're inherently a racist and a bad person.
Yep. It's a very easy game to play.
Ms. Lim wants to Scribe Light. I love how she white-splains black people's struggle. Again, if she actually had to be held to account for what she's preaching, she would be literally the last person to either hold a doctorate or to have any position to speak intelligently at all on any of this. Everything she does, everything she says, everything that commends her to where she is in life is suspect, if she actually practiced what she preached towards herself. But no, she holds a position of authority, and she asserts a position of authority even while preaching that she is inherently flawed, suspect, and a diminutive person in the grand scheme of things, because she's had everything handed to her. That is the inherent contradiction that I will never, ever get past when I hear somebody stand on a stage or sit in a bookstore, whatever she's doing, and tell me how terrible someone is on the basis of their race, and then expect me to take them seriously. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what race they're talking about. If this was a black woman telling me how terrible black people are, I'd be taking her as seriously as I do Dr. Harvey. It doesn't matter. Making those assessments of people on no evidence whatsoever, denigrating yourself or anybody else for nothing that they have any control over, and saying nothing about who they are, simply what they are. I'm sorry, you are operating on an antiquated, archaic version of social reality. You can gussy it up however you want, with however many diplomas you have, or doctorates, or books you've written, or whatever else, trying to make it sound like, oh, I'm being the benevolent racist.
Right.
You're still that. So, anyway, we're at the hour-and-a-half mark. I'm mentally exhausted. Anything else you want to add, Satsu, before we wrap up?
I commend you for being able to do these and sit through them, because ain't something I would choose to do to myself. But
it's like, and I've said this before, I feel like if I don't, then I am choosing to live in a bubble. You know, if I just believe that everything was hunky-dory or whatever else, whether we're reading a story on the show about something that was actually racist done, or something like a doctor like this who's promoting quote-unquote anti-racism, or whatever else, it's like I keep coming back to 9/11, and I know that sounds melodramatic, but it's absolutely true. Before 9/11, I didn't have any thought about global politics. I didn't really think about the forces beyond, my neighborhood, or what else was going on in the world, or anything else. And that wake-up call, even though I couldn't do anything to prevent it, just the notion that, Scribe, there is a larger world out there beyond the 10 feet in front of you. Oh, hi, Squishy.
Scribe says hello.
What up, Scripps?
Anyway, so yeah, I put myself through this ostensibly to learn something, and also to at least remain educated on what is going on, because this person has made a successful career around this, which scares the hell out of me. But I'd rather know that it's going on than pretend that it isn't,
Yep.
So anyway, everyone, if you haven't already, take a look at the links in the description of Satsu's channels. He's got a YouTube channel, he's got a cooking channel, and he's got a gaming channel. Especially pay attention to the cooking channel, because he actually tells you how to make food taste good, which is not a common talent these days. But all that said, if you would like to hear more from me and Satsu2Cents and the Ranting Monkey, you can find all three of us tonight on Satsu2Cents' channel, links in the description, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories that you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Anything else before we go, Sats? I already said that, but the pepper jacks hit me pretty hard.
No, that's it. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It was what some would consider fun.
Fun of a kind. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate when I have a wingman for these things, because sometimes, man, it's heavy lifting all by my lonesome. And guys, we'll decide off screen, so to speak, if we'll end up doing a part 3 halfway through this, everything we've heard. I don't know if there's anything else more to be said, but who knows? Sorry.
Before we leave, can you drop my cooking? There's people asking for the direct link in the chat.
Oh, the direct link should be in the description.
Oh, okay. It's in the description, guys. If you're looking for the cooking channel.
Yeah, in the description, you should see Satsu's main channel, cooking channel, and gaming channel. And just go down there, click on it. And be sure to subscribe. Push Satsu up in numbers. Because how far are you away from 1,000?
We're at 760. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the year is out.
Okay, yeah. Goal is try to get to 1,000 before the end of the year. I'm sure that some of you can help out with that. Very simple thing to do. Doesn't cost you anything. Helps out Satsu a lot if you would. And it's totally worth it too, because if you take a look at his recipes and follow along, you'll have some tasty meals. One of those in there is chicken divan. It comes from my mother.
Indeed.
And I might be biased. That's totally worth it too. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much for your generosity, those of you that donated. I really hope that you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And we'll see you on the next one. And be sure to check us out tonight on Lords of the Night on Satsu's channel. Again, link in the description. So, bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.